Welcome to episode 6 in our story of the Norman Conquest of Ireland. In the last episode, we explored the Leinster campaigns at Bag-and-Bun, Waterford and the First Siege of Dublin. By this point, Strongbow has finally landed in Ireland with a substantial army, but in doing so he has effectively committed treason, King Henry II having revoked his permission to depart. As mentioned earlier, this detail adds an important new dimension to Rory O'Connor's earlier decision to show mercy to Dermot McMurrough. If Strongbow had known that McMurrough was dead, and if he had also received Henry's order to abandon the invasion, he would have likely obeyed his king. McMurrough was not only his sole Irish ally, but his main source of supplies and political support. Just as importantly, he was able to provide the men of Leinster who were essential in sustaining the Norman campaigns. I always find these what-if moments fascinating, and from time to time I'd love to hear from you regarding suggestions for other historical what-ifs that could become bonus episodes. Please leave any ideas you have in the comments. But returning to the story, let's shift our focus back to Dermot McMurrough. By this stage he's achieved everything he originally set out to do. He's once again King of Leinster. However, that no longer seems to be enough. Backed by the military strength of his Norman mercenaries, Dermot appears to have begun entertaining even greater ambitions, perhaps even designs on the High Kingship of Ireland itself. And beyond this ambition there was also vengeance. Dermot still had an old score to settle with his bitter enemy Tiernan O'Rourke. From their base in Dublin, Dermot and Strongbow, supported by allied Gaelic forces and Norman mercenaries, launched a major raid deep into Meath and Breffni in an effort to punish O'Rourke. Dermot may well have hoped to depose him, just as O'Rourke had once helped drive him from power. The annals of Ulster say Leinster and Meath were ravaged, while other evidence points to raids on places such as Clonard and Kells. But the campaign produced mixed results. O'Rourke avoided being drawn into a decisive battle, and the terrain worked against the invaders. Norman cavalry, so formidable in open country, were far less effective in dense woodlands, a difficult ground into which O'Rourke's forces could withdraw. Yet for Dermot McMurrough, time was beginning to run out. He'd regained Leinster, brought the Normans into Ireland, retaken Dublin, and once again made himself one of the most feared men in the country. But the strain of years of war, exile and ceaseless campaigning was now catching up with him. By the spring of 1171, Dermot's health was in visible decline. The man who had spent years fighting to reclaim his kingdom now found himself too weak to lead from the front. And so at this very moment, when his ambitions may have been growing, his body began to fail him. Having returned to Ferns, Dermot died shortly afterwards in May 1171. The Irish annals record his death in stark and hostile terms, reflecting the bitterness many churchmen felt towards him after years of warfare and devastation. The annals of Ulster said that Dermot McMurrough, King of Leinster, died at Ferns after the destruction of many churches and territories. The annals of the Four Masses describe his death as follows. He died of an insufferable and unknown disease where he became putrid while living, and he died without making a will, without penance. And so ended the life of a man who sacrificed so much to regain his kingdom, only to die shortly after reclaiming it. Interestingly, King James VI of Scotland and the future King James I of England was a distant descendant of Dermot McMurrough. This connection exists through the marriage of McMurrough's daughter Aoife, whose descendants married into the Scottish House of Stuart. Most historians accept that Dermot McMurrough died of natural causes at Ferns in May 1171. There has been occasional speculation that foul play may have been involved, largely because his death came at such a convenient moment for Strongbow. But there's no solid evidence in the Irish annals or any other contemporary sources. Dermot's death appears to have been natural. Yet the timing does change everything. Within Leinster, the succession was immediately contested. Dermot's brother Murcid emerged as a strong contender. Remember the Gaelic system of tanistry. Murcid and many other members of the McMurrough family rejected Strongbow's claim because he was not part of the Derban. Strongbow's claim, though strengthened by his marriage to Aoife, was not acceptable. Having Strongbow support Dermot as an ally was one thing, but allowing an ambitious Norman lord to inherit Leinster was something else entirely. Dermot's death would therefore create a new power struggle, but Strongbow will have a much bigger concern, and that is King Henry II. Up until this point, Strongbow could present himself as an ally of the restored king and the most powerful of Dermot's mercenaries. But with Dermot dead, he was suddenly something far more dangerous, a claimant to Leinster through his marriage to Aoife. That was a very different proposition, and one that King Henry II was unlikely to welcome. Henry had given Dermot permission to recruit assistants from among his subjects, but he had not intended to allow one of his most ambitious lords to carve out their own rival kingdom across the Irish Sea. That helps explain why Henry II moved to restrain the expedition and then will intervene directly himself. And Henry II has his own claim to Ireland. In 1155, Pope Adrian IV, the only English pope in history by the way, is traditionally said to have granted Henry authority to intervene in Ireland in order to promote church reform and bring the Irish Church into closer conformity with Roman practice. This document is known as Laudabiliter and is also the subject of much modern debate. The question of whether it's a forgery divides opinion, with the Vatican having no record of the document. The text is known chiefly through later copies, especially in Gerald of Wales, but its authenticity has been long debated by historians. Some regard it as genuine, others suspect that the surviving version may be a reworking, an embellishment, or even an outright falsification. But whatever its precise status, the text did exist in circulation by the latter 12th century, and Henry supporters would certainly use it to help justify Norman intervention in Ireland. That's where we'll leave the story for today. In our next episode, we will turn our attention to the growing resistance that emerged in the wake of Dermot's death, as his brother Murkid rose to oppose Strongbow's claim and Ireland would slide further into conflict. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure to subscribe and also maybe leave a comment or a rating. I will just help the podcast in the algorithms, and I'd appreciate any support you have. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.